You know what terrifies me more than a stock market crash or an economic recession? It's watching good people work their entire lives and still end up broke. I'm talking about folks who punch the clock every single day, who sacrifice time with their families, who do everything they're supposed to do, and yet somehow they never get ahead. They retire with almost nothing. They depend on Social Security checks that barely cover groceries. And the worst part is, they have no idea what went wrong. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to talk about. Being poor is rarely about how much money you earn. I've seen people making $30,000 a year build more wealth than people making $300,000. I've watched families living in small towns accumulate serious savings while big city professionals with fancy degrees stay trapped in debt. The difference isn't luck. It's not about being in the right place at the right time. It comes down to four specific mistakes that destroy wealth faster than anything else. And chances are you're making at least one of them right now without even knowing it. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two farmers standing in identical fields on the first day of spring. They both have the same soil, the same weather, the same seeds. One farmer plants his crops, waters them carefully, pulls the weeds, and by harvest time his field is overflowing with food. The other farmer plants his seeds too, but he never bothers to check for weeds. He waters randomly. He lets pests eat half his crops. By autumn, his field is barren. Now, would you say the second farmer was unlucky? Would you blame the economy or the weather? Of course not. He made mistakes that guaranteed his failure. Your financial life works exactly the same way. Most people are planting seeds and then wondering why nothing grows, never realizing they're making fundamental errors that sabotage everything. The first mistake is something I see everywhere I go, and it's absolutely killing the middle class. It's what I call financial blindness. People are walking through life with their eyes closed when it comes to money. They have zero awareness of where their dollars actually go. Ask someone how much they spent last month and watch them guess. Ask them to name their biggest expense after rent, and they'll stumble. This isn't about being stupid or careless. It's about never being taught to pay attention. I'll tell you a story that still sticks with me. Years ago, I met a man named Robert who worked as a manager at a manufacturing plant. He made about $75,000 a year, which in his town was good money. But Robert was stressed all the time. He couldn't sleep at night. His credit cards were maxed out, and he had no idea how he'd pay for his daughter's college in a few years. When we sat down together, I asked him one simple question: how much money comes in every month, and how much goes out? He couldn't answer. So we pulled up his bank statements and started adding things up. What we found was staggering. Robert was spending almost $600 every month on his truck payment for a vehicle he barely used because he got a company car. Another $250 on cable and streaming services for shows he never watched. He had 3 different gym memberships because he kept signing up for new ones and forgetting to cancel the old ones. Altogether, we found over $1,500 a month that was just evaporating. That's $18,000 a year. Money that could have been invested, saved, or used to pay off debt. Instead, it was gone, and Robert had nothing to show for it. This is the reality for millions of Americans. They're hemorrhaging money, and they don't even see it happening. You can't navigate if you don't know where you are. You can't build wealth if you don't know where your money goes. It's that simple and that devastating. The second mistake builds right on top of the first one, and it's what keeps people trapped no matter how much their income grows. I call it the treadmill of wanting more. Every single time people earn a little extra money, they immediately find ways to spend it. They upgrade their lifestyle to match their new income, and sometimes they even go beyond it. Think about how this plays out in real life. Someone's been driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that runs perfectly fine. Then they get a promotion at work. Suddenly, that Civic feels embarrassing. They start thinking they deserve something better, so they go out and finance a brand new SUV with a $500 monthly payment. Meanwhile, their old car had no payment at all. That promotion that was supposed to improve their life just created a new expense that eats up most of the raise. Or consider the young professional who's been renting a modest apartment for $1,200 a month. She gets a new job with a $20,000 salary bump. Instead of banking that extra money, she moves to a luxury apartment complex with a pool and a fitness center that costs $2,000 a month. Plus now she needs nicer furniture to match the fancy place. She buys new clothes because her coworkers dress better. She starts going to expensive happy hours because that's where everyone networks. Within 6 months, she's actually saving less money than she was before the raise. This pattern is everywhere, and it's completely invisible to the people doing it. They think they're just living a normal life, enjoying the fruits of their labor. But what they're really doing is running faster and faster on a treadmill that never actually takes them anywhere. The wealthy operate on a completely different principle. When their income increases, their lifestyle stays relatively flat. That creates a growing gap between what they earn and what they spend, and that gap is where all wealth comes from. I learned this lesson the hard way early in my career. When I started making serious money, I did exactly what everyone else does. Bigger house, nicer cars, expensive vacations. I felt successful. I felt like I had made it. But then I had a moment of clarity when I realized something horrifying. If my income ever dropped, even temporarily, my entire life would collapse. I had built a lifestyle that required every dollar I earned just to maintain. There was no cushion, no margin for error, no real wealth being created. I was just a well-paid hamster on a very expensive wheel. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I drew a line in the sand with my lifestyle. I decided that no matter how much my income grew, I would keep my core expenses relatively stable. I could increase my giving. I could invest more. I could build businesses. But my day-to-day lifestyle would not inflate just because I could afford it. That single decision created more wealth for me than any investment strategy or business deal ever did. The third mistake is more subtle but equally destructive. It's what I call optimism without preparation. People walk through life assuming everything will work out fine. They'll deal with retirement later. They'll save money next year when they're making more. They'll get serious about investing once they understand it better. They're always planning to start tomorrow, next month, next year. But tomorrow never comes. Here's what this looks like in practice. A family is living comfortably on their dual income. Both parents work, both have decent jobs, everything seems stable. But they have almost nothing saved because they keep telling themselves they'll start soon. Then one of them gets laid off, or someone gets sick, or the car breaks down and needs a $4,000 repair. Suddenly their entire world is in crisis mode. They're borrowing from family, maxing out credit cards, taking out payday loans at criminal interest rates. And the tragedy is that this was completely preventable. I compare this to building a house in a flood zone. You might go years without any problems. The sun is shining, everything looks great, and you start thinking maybe the flood will never come. But the flood always comes eventually. Life throws curveballs at everyone. Jobs disappear, health issues emerge, economies crash, unexpected expenses hit. The question isn't whether these things will happen. The question is whether you'll be prepared when they do. Wealthy people understand that hope is not a strategy. They plan for bad scenarios while enjoying good times. They build emergency funds that can cover 6 months of expenses. They have insurance that actually protects them. They diversify their income so they're not dependent on a single source. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. It's understanding that the future is uncertain and preparing accordingly. I remember sitting down with a couple in their late 50s who had been putting off retirement planning for decades. They kept saying they'd get to it, kept meaning to talk to someone, kept planning to start saving seriously. But life kept happening. Kids needed braces. The roof needed repairs. There was always something more urgent than planning for a future that seemed far away. Now they were staring down retirement in less than 10 years with almost nothing saved, and the panic in their eyes was heartbreaking. They had wasted 30 years of compound growth, 30 years of opportunity, because they kept waiting for the perfect time to start. The perfect time never exists. There's always a reason to wait, always an excuse to delay. But every day you wait costs you more than you can imagine. $1 invested at age 25 grows into nearly $11 by age 65 if it earns an average return. That same dollar invested at age 45 only grows to about $3. The cost of waiting is staggering, and most people never do the math to see what their procrastination is actually stealing from them. Now we come to the fourth mistake, and this one might be the most important of all because it affects everything else. It's what I call financial illiteracy disguised as normal. Most people are making decisions about money based on what everyone else around them is doing, not based on what actually works. They finance cars because that's what everyone does. They carry credit card balances because that's normal. They have no idea how compound interest works, how taxes affect their investments, or what inflation is doing to their purchasing power. And they don't seek out this knowledge because they think not knowing is normal. Let me be clear about something. Your schools failed you. They taught you algebra and chemistry and the history of ancient Rome, but they never taught you how money actually works. They never explained the difference between good debt and bad debt. They never showed you how to read a financial statement or understand a mortgage. You graduated ready to recite Shakespeare, but completely unprepared to build wealth. And that wasn't an accident. A financially illiterate population is easier to sell to, easier to charge fees to, easier to keep working jobs they hate because they're trapped by debt. But here's the thing. What you don't know is absolutely destroying you. Every day you make financial decisions based on incomplete information or flat-out wrong assumptions. You think a tax refund is free money when it's really an interest-free loan you gave to the government. You think a car payment is just part of life when it's actually one of the biggest obstacles to building wealth. You think keeping money in a savings account earning 0.1% is being responsible when inflation is eating your purchasing power at 3% a year. I met a young man recently who was so proud that he'd negotiated his credit card interest rate down from 24% to 18%. He thought he'd won. But he was still carrying a $5,000 balance and making minimum payments, which meant he'd end up paying thousands in interest over the years. When I asked him why he didn't just pay it off, he looked confused. He was making $40,000 a year, and the idea of taking a few months to aggressively pay down that debt had never occurred to him. Nobody had ever taught him that carrying credit card debt at any interest rate is financial suicide. This is the gap that keeps people poor. They don't know what they don't know, and they're not curious enough to find out. Meanwhile, wealthy people treat financial education like oxygen. They read constantly, they ask questions, they study how money works, they learn from people who've built wealth before them. They understand that knowledge isn't just power, it's profit. Think about it this way. If you don't understand how your car works, you're at the mercy of every mechanic who wants to overcharge you. If you don't understand how your body works, you're at the mercy of every fad diet and miracle cure. And if you don't understand how money works, you're at the mercy of every bank, every credit card company, every financial institution that makes billions off your ignorance. The beautiful thing is that all four of these mistakes are completely fixable. You're not doomed to repeat them forever. But fixing them requires something that most people aren't willing to do. It requires you to get brutally honest with yourself about where you actually are right now, not where you wish you were or where you pretend to be. Start with the first mistake, that financial blindness we talked about. Here's your action step, and it's going to be uncomfortable. For the next 30 days, track every single dollar that comes in and goes out, not approximately, not kind of, every dollar. Write it down, use an app, keep receipts, whatever works for you. But know exactly where your money is going. You're going to be shocked. I promise you'll find hundreds, if not thousands of dollars disappearing into places you never intended. I had a friend do this exercise and she discovered she was spending $470 a month at Target, not on groceries or necessities, just random stuff. Decorative pillows, candles, clearance items that seemed like deals. She'd go in for toothpaste and walk out with a cart full of things she didn't need. Once she saw that number in black and white, it horrified her. She cut it down to less than $50 a month and redirected that money into paying off her student loans. Within 2 years, she was completely debt-free, all because she finally opened her eyes and looked at the truth. For the lifestyle inflation trap, here's what you need to do. Make a decision right now about what enough looks like for you. Not what society says, not what your neighbors have, not what Instagram makes you think you need. What is actually enough for you to live a good, comfortable, happy life? Write that number down. Then commit that any income above that level goes toward building wealth, not upgrading your lifestyle. When you get a raise, pretend you didn't. Keep living on your current budget and invest the difference. When you pay off a car, keep making that same payment to yourself into a savings or investment account. I know a couple who did this religiously for 15 years. They lived in the same modest house even as their income tripled. They drove reliable used cars even though they could afford luxury vehicles. Their friends thought they were crazy, thought they were cheap, thought they weren't enjoying life. But at age 45, they had enough invested to retire if they wanted to. They had complete financial freedom while their friends with the bigger houses and fancier cars were still trapped working jobs they hated, still stressed about money, still one emergency away from disaster. Who was really winning? For the optimism without preparation mistake, you need to build what I call your financial foundation before you do anything else. This means 3 things. First, save $1,000 as fast as humanly possible. Sell stuff, work overtime, cut every non-essential expense. That $1,000 is your buffer against small emergencies, so you don't have to reach for a credit card. Second, pay off all your consumer debt, everything except your mortgage. Attack it with intensity. Third, build an emergency fund that covers 3 to 6 months of your essential expenses. This is your protection against life's inevitable storms. I know that sounds like a lot, and I know you're thinking about all the reasons why you can't do it right now. But here's the reality. If you don't build this foundation, you'll spend your entire life in crisis mode, bouncing from one emergency to the next, never getting ahead. Every unexpected expense will derail you. Every economic downturn will devastate you. You'll be financially fragile in a world that rewards resilience. And for that financial illiteracy mistake, commit to becoming a student of money. Read one book on personal finance this month. Listen to podcasts while you drive. Watch educational videos instead of mindless entertainment. Learn how compound interest works, how the stock market actually functions, how taxes impact your wealth building. Spend 30 minutes a week educating yourself about money, and within a year you'll know more than 90% of the population. The knowledge is out there, and most of it is free. You don't need an MBA or a finance degree. You just need curiosity and consistency. I've seen people completely transform their financial lives simply by deciding to learn, by admitting they don't know everything, by seeking out wisdom from those who've succeeded before them. Here's what I want you to understand. These four mistakes, financial blindness, lifestyle inflation, optimism without preparation, and financial illiteracy, they're not character flaws. They're not signs that you're bad with money or destined to struggle. They're simply patterns you learned from a society that profits from keeping you broke. But patterns can be broken. Habits can be changed. Your financial future is not set in stone. The wealthiest people I know aren't smarter than you. They didn't get lucky breaks that you'll never get. They simply stopped making these four mistakes and started operating on principles that actually build wealth. And every single one of them will tell you the same thing. The hardest part was facing the truth about where they were and making the decision to change. Everything else was just execution. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this and nod along and then go back to your old patterns. Pick one of these four mistakes that resonates most with you and take action on it today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Track your spending, commit to your current lifestyle, start that emergency fund, or buy that first book on investing. Do something that breaks the pattern. Because the life you want, the freedom you crave, the security you dream about, it all starts with stopping the behaviors that are keeping you stuck. Your future self is watching what you do next, and trust me, they're hoping you finally choose differently.